Hello and welcome to another edition of KCS at Home's 4th grade social studies content. I hope this video finds you healthy and enjoying your summer break. My name is Miss Johnson and I teach 4th grade reading and social studies at Hardin Valley Elementary. Today I'm going to be sharing some information with you that you probably didn't learn while you were still at school this year. It has to do with women in the Civil War. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch the other 4th grade videos about the North and the South, the events that led to the Civil War. If you haven't, that's okay, because I'm going to start with a quick review of the Civil War. Let's get started. Our goal today is to talk about the contributions women made during the Civil War, and we're looking specifically at two women, Clara Barton and Dorothea Dix. Your goal today is to be able to name some ways women contributed during the Civil War and be able to list the ways Clara Barton and Dorothea Dix specifically contributed during and after the Civil War. To get started, let's talk about the history of the Civil War. So the Civil War was a war between the northern part of the United States and the southern part of the United States. If you look at the map at the bottom of your screen, the states in blue were part of the North, which was considered the Union, and the states in red were the South, and they were the Confederacy. So the Civil War was a war between the North and the South, citizens that were within the United States. And there were many battles during the Civil War, and these battles took place throughout the U.S. The war lasted from the time between 1861 to 1865, and it really had to do with states' rights and the issue of slavery. Slavery was a huge issue that really divided the country. Here's a larger view of the map if you'd like to look at it in more depth. You can see, as I said, the Union is in blue, Confederacy is in red, and then you also have some states in between that are called border states, and these are the states that didn't really want to get involved in the war. So when we think about women and their role before the Civil War, women typically were homemakers. They were considered the head of the home, and that usually meant that they did not work outside of the home. That was a job and a role for men to have. Women would take care of the house. So they would cook, clean, mend clothes, meaning they would fix or sew them. They would watch the children that were at home, and really their lives revolved around the home. This started to change during and especially after the Civil War. So during the Civil War, because the men were often off in battle, women would take over the duties of their husbands. So for example, when they were at home, the husbands were the ones typically running the family farm. And once their husbands would go off to war, women took over that role. Women started working outside of the home to take a lot of times over the husband's role or job. Women would organize supplies for soldiers during the war. Some women even worked as spies during the war. And if you have time to look further into women during the Civil War, I think that's a really cool topic to look up, are women who kind of worked as spies. And then the other one, and this is more what we will be talking about with Clara Barton and Dorothea Dix, is how women would often tend to the wounded and the soldiers during battle, and they were nurses on the battlefields and also within hospitals during and after the Civil War. Here's an illustration that you can take a look at that shows you some of the ways women helped during the Civil War as in their role of being a nurse. You can see that they would be near the soldiers and could offer comfort or guidance as they were recovering. There are women who were sewing and mending clothing during this time, and were there to listen and offer encouragement to soldiers during the battle. The two specific women we are looking at today are Clara Barton and Dorothea Dix. You can see Clara Barton on the left part of your screen. Dorothea Dix is on the right part of your screen. We'll start with Clara Barton. So she is considered the angel of the battlefield. She was a nurse during the Civil War, and she organized a lot of the people who would come in and help on the battlefield and outside of the battlefield to help soldiers who had been wounded. Later in life, after the Civil War ends, she ends up founding the American Red Cross, which you've probably heard of. You can see the symbol here on your screen for it. And she really pushed for the American chapter of the Red Cross to be founded. It was already happening over in Europe, and she really was the voice that made the American Red Cross chapter become a thing. She was also, which to me is kind of cool, a former teacher. The other person we're looking at during the Civil War is Dorothea Dix. She was considered the superintendent of nurses. She was kind of in charge of a lot of the nurses on the battlefield, and she was known for being very strict. She had specific ideas about the type of women who should be nurses. They should be plain looking, they shouldn't be very young, and she made sure that the nurses did their jobs and focused on helping during and after the Civil War. Prior to the Civil War, and then also afterwards as well, she really helped push for better treatment for people who were in jail or in mental hospitals, so she's considered a social reformer. And just like Clara Barton, she was also a former teacher. So when we look at the impact of Clara Barton and Dorothea Dix, there's a lot of stuff that came from their willingness to contribute during and after the Civil War. One of the biggest contributions is the founding of the American Red Cross, which to this day offers disaster relief. They hold blood drives, and they are heavily reliant on volunteers to contribute throughout the U.S. With the onset of the Civil War and afterwards, there was an expansion in the field of nursing, making it okay for women to be in the workplace, and they would take on roles as nurses in hospitals. The women's suffrage was a movement that was actually happening before the Civil War. It kind of got put on pause during the Civil War, and then afterwards picked back up and gained momentum. And this was really a movement to give women the right to vote and run for an elected office. Years later, after the Civil War, actually in 1919, the 19th Amendment was written, and it was ratified in 1920, which officially gave women the right to vote. So in recap, before the Civil War, women were expected to work at home, and that was really their sole job. During and after the Civil War, this started to change. Women started working outside of the home. They took on some of the roles that their husbands had formerly had. Women became important in the role of nursing. And specifically, Clara Barton helped contribute with nursing during and after the Civil War and helped found the American Red Cross. We have Dorothea Dix, who really helped with the nursing profession since she was considered the superintendent of nurses during the Civil War, and she was an advocate and social reformer for the imprisoned and mentally ill. And then also, not as a direct consequence of the Civil War, but later on, women end up gaining the right to vote and run for elected office during the 19th Amendment, which was part of the women's suffrage movement. Your job, after listening to all this, you will actually be reading some information, and you can see it over here on the left. It'll be information that will talk specifically about women's contributions during the Civil War, and then focus in on Dorothea Dix and Clara Barton. And then from that, you're going to have a word box that you can use for the close activity, where you'll read through some paragraphs and fill in the blanks with the word that best fits based on context and the information that you've learned from your reading and from this video. To help you out with this, if you want to pursue this further, if you go to BrainPop and you search for causes of the Civil War, you'll be able to watch a video that lays out all the different things going on in the United States during the time that eventually causes war to break out between the North and the South. And BrainPop is free currently for any student, so you can check with your parents about signing up if you need to, and that way you can watch videos on a lot of different things in social studies, or really any topic you want to look up. Also, if you have your social studies yellow workbook at home, it will be chapter 19 of Gallopade if you want to look in there and read about the causes of the Civil War, women during the Civil War, Clara Barton, Dorothea Dix, all of that is within chapter 19. And there's some really good information in there that you can read through. You could also look on Social Studies Weekly online. If you go to that website, week 27 is specifically about women during the Civil War. This is another site that is offering free access, and I really like this one. This was actually curriculum that we used to use, so it has some good resources. Two other things you might want to check out. One is the website that has information about Clara Barton, where she was born, and there's a museum, and there's lots of information that you can look up on this website right here. And then the bottom website is the website for the Red Cross. If you're interested in finding out more of the history of the Red Cross, or what this organization looks like in different countries, you can go to the website and find out all kinds of information that way. So this is actually the end of our video, and I hope that in watching this video that you have learned some ways that the role of women changed during and then especially after the Civil War, and kind of why that happened. And then I also hope that you're able to list something specific about Clara Barton and something about Dorothea Dix. When you go to do your task, the other option that you have on there, and I highly encourage you to do this one, is to think about someone in your life who has made a positive contribution to your community or to your life, and write a thank you note to that person, telling them that you appreciate the things that they've done. With that, I leave you for today, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your summer break, and I hope that you will tune in for more social studies videos in the future. Thanks. Bye.